The first light of dawn crept across the research station's observation deck, casting long shadows over rows of complex monitoring equipment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned against the reinforced glass, her breath fogging a small circle as she watched the distant Earth hanging like a blue-green marble against the infinite darkness of space. It had been 17 months since the Galactic Council's first contact. 17 months of promises, negotiations, and increasingly tense discussions that seemed to grow more complicated with each passing week. Elena knew something was fundamentally wrong, even if most of her colleagues couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. The communication had begun innocently enough. A crystalline transmission that appeared simultaneously on every digital screen across the planet. No static, no interference, just a perfectly clear message from beings who claimed to represent a vast interstellar confederation. Most of humanity had been ecstatic. Politicians celebrated. Scientists like Elena were invited to exclusive briefings. The world seemed to be on the brink of its greatest moment. But Elena had always been different. Where others saw opportunity, she saw complexity. Where her peers saw advancement, she sensed something deeper, a subtle pressure that felt more like manipulation than cooperation. The Galactic Council's representatives were unlike anything humans had imagined. They weren't the little green beings from old science fiction movies, nor were they terrifying monsters. They were something far more unsettling, perfectly rational, impossibly elegant beings that seemed to understand humanity better than humans understood themselves. Their technology was generations ahead of anything Earth had developed. They could cure diseases with a thought, regenerate entire ecosystems with minimal effort, and solve complex mathematical problems in milliseconds. They offered humanity everything: clean energy, medical miracles, interstellar travel, solutions to climate change, poverty, and resource scarcity. And yet, something felt wrong. Elena remembered the first time she truly recognized the disconnect. It was during a closed-door meeting with Dr. Wei from the United Nations Extraterrestrial Cooperation Committee. They were discussing the Council's proposed integration plan, a comprehensive strategy that would fundamentally transform human society. "They want to help us," Dr. Wei had said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Can you imagine? An end to suffering, to conflict?" But Elena had watched the holographic presentations differently. She noticed the subtle ways the Council's proposals would gradually erode human agency. Each solution came with invisible strings, small compromises that would ultimately reshape human civilization into something unrecognizable. The underground resistance movement began in the most unexpected place, a small coffee shop in Buenos Aires. It wasn't a dramatic gathering of armed rebels or a secret military installation. Instead, it was a quiet conversation between people who had started to notice the subtle changes happening around them. Olivia Reyes, a high school history teacher, had been collecting evidence for months. Her walls were covered with interconnected threads, photographs, and notes, a complex web of observations that most would have dismissed as conspiracy theory. But Olivia understood patterns. Years of teaching history had taught her that significant changes often happened not with a bang, but with a whisper. The coffee shop was quiet that morning. Weak sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows on the worn wooden tables. Olivia sat across from Luis Gomez, a retired engineer who had worked on early quantum computing projects. His hands, weathered and scarred from decades of technical work, traced the edges of a document she had brought. "Look at the medical protocols," Olivia said quietly. "Each treatment the Council offers comes with a complete genetic profile submission. They're not just healing, they're cataloging." Luis adjusted his glasses, carefully examining the technical diagrams. His trained eye caught the microscopic details that most would overlook. "It's more than cataloging," he muttered. "They're creating a comprehensive map of human genetic potential. Every treatment is another piece of data." The Galactic Council's approach was brilliantly subtle. They didn't demand submission, they offered solutions. Clean energy that would solve climate change. Medical treatments that could eliminate genetic diseases. Educational systems that could accelerate human learning exponentially. Each offer was wrapped in a package of pure potential, making resistance seem not just futile, but almost immoral. But Olivia and Luis had discovered something else. Something far more concerning. The genetic profiles weren't just being collected. They were being compared, analyzed, categorized. Some individuals were receiving more advanced treatments than others. Subtle differences that most would never notice, but which suggested a deeper, more insidious selection process. "They're breeding us," Luis said, his voice barely a whisper. "Not like farm animals. Something more sophisticated. They're guiding human evolution." Across the city, similar conversations were happening. In small apartments, university research labs, community centers. People who had begun to see beyond the surface of the Council's seemingly perfect offers. The resistance wasn't about rejecting advancement. It was about preserving human unpredictability. The messy, beautiful chaos that had defined human progress for millennia. Back at the research station, Elena Rodriguez was making her own discoveries. The device she had been developing wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a complex quantum interference generator, something that could disrupt the precise communication networks the Galactic Council relied upon. Her preliminary tests were promising. Brief moments of communication breakdown. Microscopic errors in their seemingly perfect data streams. Each test was a small rebellion, a tiny crack in their impenetrable facade. The Council's representatives remained calm. Always calm. Their humanoid forms moved with an unsettling precision, their conversations always perfectly measured. They didn't get angry. They didn't show frustration. They simply adjusted their approach, always one step ahead. But humans had something they didn't understand. Something that couldn't be mapped or predicted. The capacity for irrational hope. The ability to choose difficulty over comfortable submission. The fundamental human drive to forge their own path, no matter the cost. As the sun continued to rise over Buenos Aires, over the research station, over countless cities around the world, a quiet revolution was beginning. Not with weapons or grand declarations, but with careful observations, whispered conversations, and an unbreakable determination to remain truly, imperfectly human. The old industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted metal sheets covered broken windows, and overgrown vegetation crept up its weathered walls. But inside, a different world was taking shape, a nerve center of human resistance that the Galactic Council couldn't detect. Technological ironies weren't lost on the group gathered inside. They were using the Council's own communication technologies against them, encrypted networks built from repurposed alien communication fragments. Each person brought a unique skill, a network engineer, a genetic researcher, a former diplomat, a quantum physicist, and others who had seen through the Council's perfect veneer. Raul Oliveira, the former diplomat, spread a holographic map across an old industrial workbench. The projection showed global communication networks, alien transmission points, and subtle patterns of genetic modification. His fingers traced invisible lines, connecting disparate pieces of information. "They're not just collecting data," Raul explained, his voice low and intense. "They're creating a predictive model of human potential. Every interaction, every medical treatment, every educational program, it's all part of a massive computational experiment." Dr. Helena Kimura, the genetic researcher, nodded. Her hands moved rapidly, manipulating complex genetic sequences on a transparent data screen. "The modification patterns are fascinating. They're not randomizing. They're selecting. Certain genetic markers are being subtly encouraged, others suppressed." The warehouse hummed with repurposed equipment, some human, some clearly of alien origin. Salvaged communication arrays stood next to modified quantum computers. Maps covered entire walls, filled with color-coded annotations and complex connection lines. What made their resistance unique was its approach. They weren't fighting with traditional weapons. Their arsenal was information, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to human complexity. A younger member of the group, Victor, a brilliant network engineer, had discovered something extraordinary. The Galactic Council's communication networks had what he called predictive blind spots, moments of computational vulnerability that occurred when their systems tried to process truly unpredictable human behavior. It's like they have an algorithm for everything, Victor explained, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. But humans? We don't always make sense. And that's our greatest weapon. Their strategy wasn't destruction. It was disruption. Small, almost imperceptible interventions that would gradually reveal the limitations of the Council's supposedly perfect system. Meanwhile, back at the research station, Elena Rodriguez was conducting her own experiments. The quantum interference generator she had been developing was more than just a communication disruptor. It was a prototype that could potentially create momentary spaces of pure human unpredictability, computational zones that the Council's predictive models couldn't penetrate. Her preliminary data was fascinating. Brief moments where alien communication networks would experience what could only be described as computational confusion. Milliseconds where their perfect predictions would momentarily collapse. The Galactic Council's representatives continued their calm, precise interactions. They appeared in diplomatic meetings, scientific conferences, and global forums, always composed, always offering solutions that seemed too perfect to be true. But beneath the surface, something was changing. Humans were beginning to remember something fundamental about themselves. That their strength had never been about perfection. It was about adaptation. About facing challenges. About the beautiful, messy process of growth and discovery. The resistance was growing. Not through violence or grand declarations, but through careful, calculated understanding. Each member knew the stakes. This wasn't just about resisting an alien intervention. This was about preserving the core of human experience. As night fell over the warehouse, the group continued their work. Maps glowed. Data streams flickered. And somewhere in the complex network of human determination, a revolution was taking shape, quiet, persistent, and utterly unpredictable. In the small coastal town of Valparaiso, Chile, an unexpected resistance fighter emerged. Rosa Martinez ran a small community center that had become something far more important than anyone could have imagined. What looked like a simple after-school program was actually a carefully constructed network of human connection, a system that defied every predictive model the Galactic Council had created. Rosa understood something profound about human potential that the Council's algorithms could never comprehend. Connection wasn't about efficiency. It was about the messy, unpredictable ways humans supported each other. Her community center was a labyrinth of human interactions. Children from different backgrounds learned together. Elderly residents shared stories. Immigrants and locals created unexpected friendships. Each interaction was a tiny rebellion against the Council's systematic approach to human development. The center's walls were covered with handmade art, complex murals that told stories of local history, migration, struggle, and hope. These weren't just decorations. They were a living document of human experience, something no algorithm could fully capture. Victor from the resistance group had discovered something remarkable about these community interactions. Each spontaneous connection created what he called computational noise, unpredictable patterns that disrupted the Council's carefully constructed models. It's like throwing sand into a precision machine, Victor had explained during their last encrypted meeting. These human connections are utterly nonsensical to their systems. They can't predict genuine human empathy. At the research station, Elena Rodriguez was making her own breakthrough. The quantum interference generator had revealed something unexpected. When activated, it created momentary spaces where human creativity could flourish without external observation. Brief windows of pure, unmonitored human potential. Her latest tests showed something extraordinary. These interference zones allowed people to communicate, create, and connect in ways that completely escaped the Council's monitoring systems. It was as if she had discovered a way to create invisible pockets of human freedom. The Galactic Council's representatives continued their calm approach. In global conferences, they presented solutions to humanity's most pressing problems. Climate restoration. Disease elimination. Educational revolution. Each offer was wrapped in a package of seemingly perfect logic. But Rosa understood the true value of imperfection. In her community center, she had started a unique program. Intergenerational storytelling workshops where elderly residents shared life experiences with younger generations. No technology. No recording. Just human voices, human memories. These workshops became a form of cultural preservation that the Council couldn't comprehend. Stories of survival. Of love. Of unexpected kindness. Memories that couldn't be reduced to data points or predictive models. Her youngest participants were developing something the Council feared most: critical thinking rooted in human experience. A young girl named Lucia had recently asked a question that perfectly captured this resistance. During a storytelling session about local history, she looked up and asked, "But what about the parts they didn't write down? The stories between the stories?" It was exactly the kind of question that made the Galactic Council's computational system stutter. The resistance was growing. Not through grand declarations or violent rebellion, but through small, persistent acts of human connection. Through the preservation of cultural memory. Through the celebration of imperfection. Each spontaneous interaction was a tiny rebellion. Each shared story a weapon against systematic control. As the morning light filled Rosa's community center, something was becoming clear. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in technological perfection. It was in its ability to find meaning in the unexpected. To create beauty from chaos. To connect in ways that defied all logical prediction. The Galactic Council was about to learn a lesson they never anticipated. Humanity wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a mystery to be experienced. Deep in the Andes Mountains, an unexpected sanctuary of human resistance took root. The research facility was unlike anything the Galactic Council had anticipated, a place where traditional knowledge merged with cutting-edge understanding. Dr. Diego Vargas had spent decades studying indigenous knowledge systems. What began as an anthropological research project had transformed into humanity's most sophisticated defense mechanism. The facility looked like an ordinary agricultural research center from the outside: terraced fields, traditional farming techniques, and simple buildings blending into the mountainous landscape. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. The indigenous communities had developed communication systems that predated modern technology. Complex linguistic patterns, intricate hand movements, storytelling techniques that carried multiple layers of meaning. These were communication methods that defied digital translation, creating natural encryption that no alien algorithm could fully decode. Diego walked through the facility's main research hall, where holographic displays mixed with traditional weaving patterns. Young researchers worked alongside community elders, creating a hybrid knowledge system that was both ancient and futuristic. "They can't map what they don't understand," an elder named Karina explained, her hands moving in complex patterns as she spoke. "Our stories are not linear. Our knowledge is not a straight line. It's a web. A living, breathing connection." The Galactic Council's representatives had initially been fascinated by these communities. They saw them as potential case studies, perfect populations to study traditional human adaptation. What they didn't realize was that they were walking into a trap of human complexity. Elena Rodriguez's quantum interference generator had found its most powerful application here. The mountain facility had become a testing ground for creating computational dead zones, spaces where alien monitoring systems simply couldn't function. Victor's network analysis revealed something remarkable. These dead zones weren't just technological interruptions. They were spaces of pure human potential. Moments where creativity, tradition, and innovation merged in ways no predictive model could anticipate. The Resistance had discovered something fundamental. The Galactic Council's greatest weakness was its reliance on predictability. They understood systems, but they couldn't comprehend the human capacity for spontaneous creation. In the facility's central meeting room, a group of researchers from different disciplines gathered. Geneticists worked alongside linguists. Computer engineers collaborated with traditional healers. Each brought a unique perspective to their shared mission. "We're not just resisting," Diego explained during one of their strategy sessions. "We're reimagining what human potential means." Their approach was multi-layered. They weren't fighting the Council with traditional weapons or direct confrontation. Instead, they were creating alternative systems of knowledge, communication, and understanding that existed beyond the Council's comprehension. The mountain facility had become more than a research center. It was a living laboratory of human resilience. Genetic researchers had discovered something extraordinary. The very genetic modifications the Council had introduced were creating unexpected mutations. Not dangerous mutations, but adaptations that suggested human DNA was far more complex than any alien algorithm could predict. A young researcher named Anna showed Diego a recent genetic analysis. "Look," she said, pointing to a complex molecular diagram. "These modifications aren't controlling us. They're helping us evolve in ways even the Council didn't anticipate." Outside, traditional agricultural techniques mixed with advanced hydroponics. Crops grew using methods that combined centuries-old indigenous knowledge with quantum agricultural technologies. Each plant, each seed became a tiny rebellion against systematic control. The Galactic Council watched. Always watching. But for the first time, they were encountering something truly unprecedented. A form of resistance they couldn't quantify. Couldn't predict. Couldn't control. As the mountain sun began to set, casting long shadows across the research facility, something was becoming clear. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in fighting. It was in its capacity to adapt, to create, to find meaning in the most unexpected places. The real revolution was just beginning. Global communication systems flickered. For the first time, the Galactic Council experienced something entirely unprecedented: uncertainty. The Resistance had been preparing for this moment. Not as a military operation, but as a profound demonstration of human potential. From the research stations to the mountain facilities, from community centers to hidden communication networks, humanity had been weaving something extraordinary. In the United Nations headquarters, the final confrontation took an unexpected form. Instead of weapons or diplomatic arguments, the human representatives brought something far more powerful: a comprehensive demonstration of human complexity. Diego Vargas stood at the center of the massive conference hall. Beside him, Elena Rodriguez, Rosa Martinez, and representatives from indigenous communities, scientific research centers, and grassroots organizations formed an unusual alliance. They weren't there to fight. They were there to explain. The Galactic Council's representatives sat motionless, their humanoid forms perfect, their expressions unreadable. But something was different. For the first time, there was a subtle hint of confusion in their computational interfaces. "You've been trying to solve humanity," Diego began, his voice calm and steady. "But we're not a problem to be solved. We're a living, breathing ecosystem of potential." Elena stepped forward, activating a holographic display that was unlike anything the Council had seen before. It wasn't a linear presentation. It was a living, breathing map of human interactions. Each connection point pulsed with color, moved with unexpected patterns, created intricate designs that constantly shifted and reformed. "This is humanity," she explained. "Not a system to be optimized, but a living network of creativity." The display showed something remarkable. Every genetic modification, every technological intervention the Council had introduced was being transformed. Humans weren't just adapting to the changes, they were reimagining them in ways no algorithm could predict. Rosa Martinez shared stories from her community center. Moments of unexpected human connection. Children from different backgrounds creating art. Elderly residents sharing wisdom. Immigrants finding new homes. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of human experience. The Galactic Council's primary representative, a being of perfect symmetry and calculated movements, attempted to interrupt. But for the first time, its communication systems stuttered. Victor's network interference, combined with the quantum disruption generators, had created something unprecedented. Computational spaces where prediction became impossible. Where human creativity existed beyond algorithmic understanding. The indigenous elder, Karina, stepped forward. Her hands moved in complex patterns as she spoke. "Your greatest mistake was believing you could understand us through data. We are not lines of code. We are stories. We are connections. We are possibilities." The holographic display began to change. It was no longer just a representation of human interactions. It became a living, breathing entity. Each connection point told a story. Each interaction created new potential. The display was alive in a way no technological system could comprehend. The Galactic Council's representatives experienced something entirely new. Not just data. Not just information. But meaning. They had come to Earth believing they could guide human evolution. Instead, they were learning something fundamental about the nature of existence itself. Humanity wasn't a problem to be solved or a system to be optimized. It was a continuous process of creation. Of unexpected connections. Of finding meaning in the most surprising places. "We reject your intervention," Diego said quietly. "Not because we're afraid of advancement. But because our strength is in our ability to choose our own path." The conference hall fell silent. The holographic display continued to pulse and move, a living testament to human potential. The Galactic Council had a choice. Understand or withdraw. In that moment, humanity demonstrated its truest power. Not through aggression. Not through resistance. But through the simple, profound act of being genuinely, unpredictably human. The universe watched. And waited.